Welcome to today's deep dive. We're going to explore
Okay.
how your name can actually cause you some pretty serious technological trouble. You know,
Mhm.
imagine being denied a loan, not because of like your credit score,
Right.
but because of your last name.
Oh,
And
geez.
and that is the reality for people named Null.
Huh. Interesting.
And yes, like the computer science term.
Right. Yeah, I know what you mean.
So,
It's a wild case study. Really
yeah.
shows how deeply our names are tied to the digital world these days, and how a simple programming concept can have these crazy consequences.
Absolutely. And we've got this Wall Street Journal article, and it's going to take us into the lives of some of these people whose last name is Null.
Okay,
And
cool.
it highlights some of the really frustrating situations that they deal with on a regular
I
basis.
bet. Yeah, and it's not just frustrating.
Right.
It really makes you think about data security and, systemic errors and the responsibility of these tech creators, to consider the human impact of their
It
designs.
really does. It really does. And the article brings up this woman, Nantra Null.
Okay.
She's a clothing designer.
Hmm.
And she almost missed her friend's wedding in India because the visa system
Ooh.
literally could not process her last name.
Oh, no.
A non-refundable flight a week before the wedding.
Oh, man.
All because her last name was basically seen as an error?
Oh,
Talk
jeez.
about stress.
That's a perfect example of what can happen.
Yeah.
Like when Null bumps up against real life, like in programming, imagine a form
Yeah.
with a required field. If you leave a blank, it's like entering null.
Right.
The system doesn't know what to do with it.
Right.
It can't recognize it as valid data, and that leads to problems.
All sorts of problems.
All sorts.
And so, thankfully, Nantra's visa did arrive in time, but it's definitely a cautionary tale about how something
Yeah,
as simple as a last name can become a
right.
major hurdle in our digital world.
It's a problem that goes way back.
Yeah.
The British computer scientist Tony Hoare, he coined the term null 50 years ago.
Wow.
And later on, he actually admitted it was like $1 billion mistake
Wow.
because of all the problems it's caused.
It's amazing to think that something from 60 years ago is still having such an impact
I
today.
know, right?
Like, I mean, are there other programming concepts that maybe could have avoided
Well,
this?
there are people working on it. There are discussions and efforts to kind of move away from null, but changing these foundational elements of these programming languages, it's a huge task, especially when you think about these legacy systems.
Right.
These older computer systems that are just really hard to update, but that a lot of businesses and organizations still rely on.
So it's like
Yeah.
trying to fit a square peg into a round hole.
Exactly.
Like the system just isn't designed
Right.
to handle a name like Null, and then
Yeah.
updating those systems is a massive undertaking.
It is massive.
But as the Wall Street Journal article points out, there's also a security angle to all
Oh,
this.
absolutely. Null could be like attack vendor,
Right.
in some systems, so it gets blocked for security reasons.
Right.
But then, unfortunately, that means legitimate users who have the last name Null, they get caught in the crossfire.
Right, exactly. And the article gives this example.
Oh,
Jan Null, a
okay.
meteorologist,
Okay.
he constantly struggles with hotel bookings
Really?
because of his last name, something I think we can all relate to.
Totally, yeah. Yeah.
Who hasn't cursed at a finicky online form?
Right, exactly.
But for Yanel, it's not
Yeah.
just an occasional annoyance, it's a recurring theme.
Oh, gosh.
His workaround is to add his first initial to his last name
Yeah.
when he books online, so basically tricking the system.
Clever.
Clever, but
Yeah.
it shouldn't have to be that way.
Yeah, it shouldn't.
Now, here's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
It's not just people actually named Null who face issues.
Oh, really?
The article talks about this guy, Joseph Tartaro,
Okay.
and he got a vanity license plate
Uh-huh.
with Null on it as a joke.
As a joke.
As a joke, he thought it would be funny to have a license plate representing an empty value.
Oh, boy.
Well, it turned out to be a pretty costly joke.
I bet.
His personal information got linked to the word null in a database.
Oh, no.
And he was bombarded with traffic tickets from incidents he had nothing to do with.
What?
Different cars, different cities, all linked back to him because of that license plate.
It's terrible.
Talk about a data nightmare.
Yeah.
Getting blamed for accidents in cars you don't even own.
Wow.
It makes you wonder how many other errors like this are lurking in systems we rely on every day.
And fixing those errors, it's not always a simple fix.
Right,
We're talking about updating huge databases,
right,
potentially overhauling these entire systems.
right. And it's incredibly expensive.
Yeah, but isn't the cost of these errors, the financial and the emotional,
Huge.
significant as well?
Yeah, it's definitely a balancing act, but ignoring the problem won't make it go away.
No, it won't.
In fact, the article suggests it might even amplify the negative impacts.
Oh, really?
It mentions Morgan Null, an attorney
Okay.
who had trouble with her internet provider.
Uh-huh.
They thought she hadn't been paying her bills because her name was so null.
Oh, wow.
And it doesn't stop there.
Oh, no.
Morgan's cousin had trouble getting her teaching license because of their shared last name.
Wow.
It's not just inconvenience. It can have a real impact on people's careers and livelihoods.
Absolutely.
It's amazing how this one little word can cause so much chaos.
I know, it's wild.
But it's also a stark reminder that technology isn't perfect.
Right.
Even the smallest choices in its design can have lasting and often unforeseen consequences.
You know, this issue with Null, it exposes a bigger problem.
Yeah.
How technology often fails to account for just the diversity of human experiences.
Yeah.
You know, what seems like a trivial decision in the abstract
Right.
can have these very real and sometimes very frustrating implications for individuals.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's unsettling to think about how vulnerable we are to these data errors.
Yeah.
We place so much trust in these systems.
Yeah. And they're just not foolproof.
Clearly not.
And, you know, the digital infrastructure that we all rely on, it's so complex. And when things go wrong, and they do, the consequences can be huge.
They really can. And these stories we've heard, they're just the tip of the iceberg.
Exactly.
Think about all the systems we rely on, banking, healthcare, online shopping, all potentially susceptible to misinterpreting Null.
It really makes you wonder if there are any safeguards in place at all, you know, to prevent this kind of stuff.
The article mentions that some experts are working on solutions to move away from Null, but that companies are sometimes hesitant to adopt these new systems.
Yeah, you know, upgrading these legacy systems,
Right.
it could be so expensive and time-consuming.
Right.
There's a lot of resistance to change,
Yeah.
especially when the current system, even though it's flawed,
Right.
you know, it still functions for most users.
Or most users.
Yeah.
But as we've seen with the nulls, ignoring the problem doesn't make it disappear.
No, it doesn't.
And it can have a real human cost.
A very real human cost. And this issue with Null, it brings up this broader challenge in technology development in general.
Okay.
We need to move beyond just creating functional systems.
Right.
And start prioritizing user experience and inclusivity.
You're right. Technology should be designed to serve everyone, not just the majority.
Exactly.
That means accounting for these edge cases, like people with unusual names, and ensuring that these systems can handle those situations gracefully.
Absolutely. And are there any specific examples you can think of?
Well, I mean,
yeah,
for how this more inclusive design could be implemented.
I think one approach is to move away from these rigid data fields.
Okay.
You know, allow for more flexibility in how information is inputted and processed.
Okay.
This could involve using natural language processing or developing systems that can just interpret and validate data in a more nuanced way.
So instead of relying on a system that just sees null as an error, we could have systems that understand the context and recognize it as a legitimate name. That seems like a huge step forward.
It would be a huge step forward.
In preventing these kind of problems.
It would, but it's definitely possible. The technology's there. It's just a matter of, you know, prioritizing these issues and investing in solutions.
It's a reminder that technology is constantly evolving, and we have the power to shape its development in a way that benefits everyone.
That's a great point. You know, this brings us back to the human element.
Yeah.
It's not enough to just build things that work technically.
Right.
We need to build things that work for people.
It's about recognizing that technology should empower, not hinder, and that we have a role to play in ensuring a more equitable digital future.
I love that.
And I think this deep dive has certainly made me more aware of these issues.
Me too.
And I'm sure it has for our listener as well.
And awareness is the first step, you know, by understanding the challenges faced by people like the Knolls.
Right.
We can start to see the world through a more critical lens.
Yeah.
You know, questioning these assumptions.
Right.
And considering the unintended consequences of these technological choices.
Absolutely. And what stands out to you, listener, from what we've talked about so far?
It's so fascinating how something as simple as a name can reveal so much about the limitations of our technological systems and the importance of human-centered design.
Absolutely. And the next step is action.
Yes.
You know, we can advocate for better data management practices, support companies that prioritize user experience, and be more vocal about the need for inclusive technology design.
Exactly. It's about actively participating in shaping a more inclusive and equitable digital world.
So to bring it back to our listeners, How can we all be more mindful of the potential consequences of technology in our daily lives?
I think it starts with paying attention to the technology we use.
Okay.
Ask questions. Who created it?
Yeah.
What values does it reflect?
Right.
How does it impact me and others?
Mm-hmm.
These questions can help us become more discerning consumers and advocates for positive change.
That's a great takeaway, developing a sense of digital literacy
Yeah,
and recognizing that technology is not neutral.
it's not.
Those are crucial steps towards a more responsible and equitable use of technology.
Absolutely. And remember,
Yeah.
technology reflects the choices we make,
Right.
the values we prioritize,
Yes.
and the kind of world we want to create.
It does.
We all have a role to play in shaping its future.
We do.
Now, before we wrap up this deep dive.
Okay. I want to circle back to Tony Hoare,
Yeah,
the computer scientist who coined the term null.
right.
He actually called it his billion-dollar mistake later in his career,
Yeah, he did.
acknowledging all the countless hours and resources
Right,
spent
right.
mitigating its problems.
It's a remarkable admission.
Yeah, yeah.
And it highlights the need for careful consideration in tech design.
Right.
Especially when you're dealing with these foundational concepts.
We've talked a lot about the problems caused by null.
We have.
But are there any potential upsides
Oh, that's interesting.
to its existence in programming?
Yeah,
Are there any situations where null is actually beneficial?
that's a great question, and it's one that often gets overlooked in these discussions.
Okay.
Null, it definitely causes issues,
Right.
but it also serves important functions in programming.
Okay.
It can be a useful tool for representing the absence of a value
Uh-huh.
or for handling certain types of errors.
Okay.
It's not inherently bad.
Okay.
It's the way it interacts with real-world data, like
Ah.
names,
Yeah.
that creates these challenges.
So it's not about eliminating null altogether,
No.
but rather about finding ways to mitigate its negative impacts
Right.
and ensure that it's used responsibly and effectively.
I think that's the key takeaway here.
I agree. This discussion has been really eye-opening.
Me too.
And I hope it has been for our listener as well.
I hope so.
It's a powerful reminder that technology should empower, not hinder, and we all have a role to play in shaping a more equitable digital future.
Well said. The story of the nulls, it just shows that technology, it's never truly value neutral.
Right?
It reflects the choices we make
Mm-hmm.
and the values we prioritize,
Yeah.
ultimately shaping the world we want to create.
This deep dive has been a fascinating journey.
It has.
What are your thoughts, listener?
Yeah.
What other seemingly innocuous choices in tech might have these unintended consequences down the line?
Right.
And how can we as individuals contribute to a more mindful and responsible approach to technological development?
It's a question worth pondering.
Yeah,
We live in a world increasingly shaped by technology,
absolutely.
and it's up to all of us to be aware of its potential pitfalls
Right.
and actively participate in shaping its future.
We've been talking about these unexpected consequences of null and how it impacts people whose last name is null.
Right.
But, this deep dive has also raised some interesting questions
Yeah.
about the relationship between technology and society as a whole.
It really forces us to confront, the human cost of these technological decisions.
It does.
We often think of technology as this, abstract force.
Oh, right.
But it's created by people.
Right.
And its impact is felt by people.
Yeah, and it's easy to get caught up in the excitement of innovation
Yeah, totally.
and forget that technology is ultimately a tool.
It is.
And like any tool, it can be used for good or for ill.
Right.
And I think the story of the nulls reminds us
Yeah.
that we need to be more thoughtful about how we wield this tool
Absolutely.
and the potential unintended consequences it can have.
The challenges faced by the nulls,
Right.
they highlight the importance of empathy in technology design.
Yeah.
We need to consider the full spectrum of human experiences
Right.
and ensure that our systems are inclusive and equitable, not just efficient and functional.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that technology is never truly neutral.
It's not.
But reflects the values and priorities of its creators
Uh-huh.
and shapes the way we interact with the world around us.
This raises a really important question.
Yeah.
What kind of digital world do we want to create?
Right.
Do we want a world where technology serves just a select few,
Right.
or a world where it empowers everyone?
That is a powerful question.
It is.
And one that I think we all need to grapple with.
We do.
The choices we make today as
Right.
individuals, as consumers, as citizens,
Absolutely.
will determine a shape of the digital landscape for generations to come.
And it's not just about these big sweeping changes either.
Right.
It's about the small everyday choices we make,
Mm-hmm.
the products we buy,
Yeah.
the companies we support,
Uh-huh.
the way we use technology in our own lives.
It's about being mindful of the power of technology.
It is.
And using that power responsibly.
Yes.
And it's about holding those who create and deploy technology
Mhm.
accountable for its impact on people and society.
You got it.
So, as you go about your day, listener,
Yeah.
I encourage you to pause and consider the technology that you interact with.
Okay.
Ask yourself,
Yeah.
who created this?
Uh-huh.
What values does it reflect?
Right.
And how does it impact my life and the lives of others?
Those are important questions.
They are, because ultimately technology is a reflection of ourselves.
It is.
It's up to us to ensure that it reflects the best of humanity,
Right.
our creativity, our compassion, and our commitment to a better future for all.
And on that note,
Yeah,
we'll wrap up our deep dive into the world of Null
right.
and the enduring legacy
Right.
of this seemingly simple programming choice.
Absolutely.
We hope this conversation has sparked your curiosity
I think it has.
and inspired you to think critically about the role of technology in our lives.
Thanks for joining us on this journey.
It's been fun.
And we look forward to diving into more fascinating topics with you next time.